Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is a leadership and personal development professor and consultant, plus Wall Street Journal and US Today best-selling author, no other than Mr. Ryan Gottfredson.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Ryan. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
For sure. So as mentioned, I'm a leadership professor at California State University, Fullerton. So if you're not familiar with Cal State Fullerton, we actually have the second largest business school in the United States. And I'm fortunate to be a part of that. I teach and do research on leadership. And then I take the ideas that I do research around and I apply them into a business context where I do consulting and I help organizations all over the world to develop their leaders and employees. And part of that journey is writing books as a way to get my ideas out into the world.
Mr. Ryan Gottfredson, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And we are hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. So let's talk about your becoming better. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, the basic premise of the book is that most people actually really don't know how to develop themselves. So one of the basic ideas is that we have two different sides of ourselves. One side of ourselves is what I call our doing side. And this is our level of talent, knowledge, skills, and abilities. And this is what we primarily focus on when we try to improve ourselves. I mean, think about our education systems, our athletic programs, our organizational development efforts, largely focused on improving our knowledge and our skills. And not that that's bad, but what I find is that it's only incrementally helpful. But there's another side of ourselves that if we focus on it, it could be transformationally helpful. And that side, it's not our doing side, it's what I call our being side. And our being side is more closely akin to our character, our mindset, our psyche, our consciousness, our emotional regulation. And ultimately, it's the quality of our internal operating system. And so what I've learned is that if we could focus on elevating along our being side, we can transform who we are. We could transformationally become better. And so this book is all about introducing ourselves to what our being side is, to be able to evaluate our altitude along our being side, and then how do we elevate along our being side to become transformationally better.
Indeed, people, let's focus. Focus is one of the key to success. How do you define personal transformation scientifically versus how it commonly understood?
Yeah, I think as mentioned, most people kind of understand personal development as improving our knowledge and skills, right? Oftentimes when we want to improve, we go get degrees or certificates or things like that. But ultimately, if we really want to transformationally become better, we've got to take it a different path and we've got to focus on our internal operating system, how we're wired to process and operate in our world. So for example, Daniel, let me ask you a question. How would you say most people respond to constructive criticism? They get what?
They get mad.
They get mad. They get defensive, right?
Yes,
This
defensive.
is an emotional knee-jerk reaction that is designed to protect ourselves because our body interprets this as an attack. But that's not the only way that our body can interpret constructive criticism. We can see and make meaning of constructive criticism as an opportunity to learn and grow. And when we can make meaning of it in that way, we have a wider window of tolerance and we create space to kind of sit with these ideas. Doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but we create that space where we're not emotionally reactive and we put ourselves in a cognitive and emotional space where we can leverage that constructive criticism to learn, grow, and improve. And so that's an example to suggest, look, It doesn't take more knowledge and more skills to take in this constructive criticism. It actually takes a refinement of our body's internal operating system so that we aren't this reactive individual, and instead we're an intentionally responsive individual.
Totally agree with you, Mr. Ryan. What was the most surprising scientific discovery you encountered while researching this book?
Well, I think the thing that I found most fascinating is that when we're talking about improving along our being side, what we're really talking about at our foundational level is our body's nervous system. And because and one of the things that I think is really fascinating about this is what we've learned is that the more trauma one has experienced in their life, the more their body becomes wired for self-protection. And while that self-protection may feel right and may feel good because it protects us from feeling uncomfortable, from looking bad, from feeling exposed, ultimately at the end of the day, those self-protective tendencies generally hold us back from learning, growing, and creating greater value in our world. So what's been fascinating to learn is that the more one experiences trauma, the more their body's nervous system becomes wired for self-protection. And the moral of this story, and to me it's a really beautiful moral, is that if we want to elevate along our being side at a foundational level, we actually need to focus on healing our minds, our bodies, and our hearts. And the more that we can heal from the trauma, the struggles that we've had in the past, then the more we're able to be a light to the world around us.
Mr. Ryan, let's talk about the science behind transformation. Can you explain the key of neuroscientific principles that make personal transformation possible?
Yeah, so one of the things, and here's what's interesting. We have more neuroscience research published in the last 10 years than all of time before that. The technologies have been advancing at the rate where now we're doing a lot of neuroscience research. So this really is kind of the cutting edge of personal development. And one of the things that we've learned is that in our brain, we have 3 brain networks. And these networks are responsible for how we process our world. They're called the salience network, which is our home of our emotions. And that's what assigns meaning to the signals that enter our brain. Then we have a default mode network. The default mode network is responsible for our non-conscious processing. And then we have a central executive network. And that network is responsible for our conscious processing. And what we've learned is that when these 3 brain networks are healthy, they work effectively together. And when they work effectively together, it allows us to see safe things as being safe and dangerous things as being dangerous. But when we experience trauma or we experience an environment that is maybe high pressure or high stress, those types of things can disrupt how these 3 brain regions work together. And in fact, they may become imbalanced in how they work together. So for example, somebody who's more hypervigilant, their salience network becomes overly strong and their default mode can't regulate it. Or the opposite is dissociation, where the default mode network overregulates our emotional salience network. And so most of us have some tendencies either towards hypervigilance or dissociation. And so when we understand this, it helps us to understand, look, if we want to better process and navigate our world, we've got to do some things to better heal these brain networks and how they work effectively, how they work together so that they can work together as a team as opposed to fight each other.
Interesting indeed, Mr. Ryan. Very well said. Beautifully articulated. How does neuroplasticity play in a role in the process of becoming better?
Yeah, what's great about understanding this is that it's really about neural connections that connect these brain regions. And our neural connections are things that we can change, we can improve, and we could work on. Our neural connections are a lot like our muscles. The more we use them, the stronger they become. And so what that means is if we've got some deficiencies going on as it relates to these neural connections in our brain, then once we could kind of understand that and learn about it, then it puts us in a position to be able to do something about it. So one of the ways that I do this with the organizations and the leaders that I work with is I focus specifically on mindsets. And mindsets are at a foundational level, these neural connections that impact how we see and make meaning of our world. So I'm assuming many listeners have probably heard of the difference between fixed and growth mindsets. And these are mindsets that when we could learn about them, when we could determine whether we have more of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, then we can engage in activities to be able to upgrade our mindset. So I found, and I've got to actually have a free assessment on my website at ryangottfredson.com. You can take this assessment to gauge the quality of your mindsets across 4 different sets of mindsets. And what I find is that I've had 50,000 people take this mindset assessment. And across the leaders that I work with, 60% of leaders have a fixed mindset. Now, I don't think all leaders believe that they have a fixed mindset, but that's what we find. And so once a leader can learn if they have a fixed mindset, that they have a fixed mindset, then we can engage in some developmental practices to help them strengthen their growth mindset neural connections.
Indeed. Totally agree with you, Mr. Ryan. What role do genetics versus environment play in a personal transformation according to the latest research?
Yeah, what's really interesting about this is that these neural connections and their functionality with these different brain networks is generally more of a factor of nurture as opposed to nature. So what we do know is the experiences that we have in life play a significant role in the health of these neural connections, right? So if somebody grows up in a very traumatic environment, that's going to lead to them adopting more self-protective mindsets, and their brain wiring gets off kilter. That's one of the kind of default responses to trauma. But if somebody grows up in a more psychologically safe environment, a healthier environment, then naturally their brain will operate more effectively. It will have healthier brain connections, healthier neural connections, which will naturally allow them to kind of process their world in a more effective way. But just because nurture may play a role in the health of our neural connections, that's good news, because it suggests that if we don't have great neural connections, then we could do something about it. We could change our neural connections. I think one of the sayings that I love is the idea that the neural connections that we need to survive our childhood are not the neural connections that we need to navigate life successfully as an adult. So most of us, if we want to operate at a high level as an adult, as a leader, as a parent, at the end of the day, we're going to have to upgrade our internal operating system. And that involves upgrading our neurology.
Indeed, we need to upgrade people every year, I think.
Agreed.
Every year we need to upgrade people. So let's talk about the mindset and behavior. How important is mindset in personal transformation, and how can someone cultivate the right one?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to go back to our example of constructive criticism, right? So if I see constructive criticism as an attack, then I'm not going to think about it very positively. I'm not going to learn from it, and I'm not going to approach it. But if I see constructive criticism as an opportunity to learn and grow, then I will think about it more positively. I will learn from it, and I'm more likely to approach it. So what I'm trying to get at here is that our mindsets, whether we realize it or not, are the most foundational aspect of everything that we do. They shape how we think, how we learn, and how we behave, and therefore our success in our life, our work, and our leadership. And so what I found is that it is transformational for people to awaken to their mindsets and upgrade their mindsets, because what they're doing is they're upgrading themselves at their most foundational level. So if we can help people awaken to their mindsets and upgrade their mindsets, we will upgrade their thinking, learning, and behavior, and therefore their success in their life, work, and leadership.
Yes, indeed. So, what's the common psychological barrier to transformation and how can it be overcome?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. So I think one of the factors is generally a lack of self-awareness. If you're listening to this, and you might be familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, which kind of suggests early in our self-development journey and self-awareness journey, we generally think of ourselves as being better than what we really are. And that's actually what I find when I work with people on mindsets. And in fact, I was that same way when I first learned about mindsets. I thought my mindsets were more positive and more value creating than what they really were. In fact, let me give you an example of this. I was working with a group it's a healthcare organization, and I was working with particular in a leader of the group. She was bringing me in to give a workshop to all of her employees. And I had all of these employees take my mindset assessment. And this is the day before the workshop. And I realized that the leader of the group hadn't taken my mindset assessment. And so I called her up and I said, "Hey, will you take the mindset assessment?" So that, because what I do is I aggregate the results to produce a collective mindset report. And I said, "I want to include your results in this report. So will you take it?" And she said, "Yes." And so she went and took it. And not too long after that, I got an email from her, and it was a rather scathing email. So she was saying, I don't agree with this assessment. My results are completely inaccurate. I'm not sure I want to be involved in this workshop tomorrow." And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is a train wreck. And so I could sense she was hot. So I said, I'm just going to let this stew, and I'm going to reach out to her in the morning and see if she's in a different space. So I didn't respond initially to her email. So I went to bed that night and I woke up to an email from her. And the email was quite interesting. So she said, "Well, I apologize for my prior email. After I sent it, I was talking to my husband about my results. And after talking to him, I think it would be a good thing for me to be a part of this workshop." So this is an example where she thought she had really good mindsets. Her mindset assessment said, "You don't really have great mindsets." And she felt like that wasn't accurate. But then her husband kind of helped her see, hey, maybe this is accurate. Here's some examples of that. And so she became more open to working on her mindsets. And I know that that's a little extreme, but I generally find that people oftentimes kind of have that initial reaction when they learn about their mindsets, is that their mindsets may not be super healthy. But what I've also learned is that most people's mindsets aren't healthy because most people have never really given concerted effort to work on their mindsets. And so that's why I love helping people out. I love helping people discover their mindsets and elevate their mindsets.
Yes, and that's why I'm urging you to create more books like this, Mr. Ryan. So, as the leadership and personal development professor and consultant and best-selling author, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
Man, well, in the short term, I'm launching my new book, Becoming Better: The Groundbreaking Science of Personal Transformation, which is all about this being side and helping us to elevate along our being side. So my short-term goal is to get that out into the world as best that I can. So I appreciate this opportunity as helping me as a part of that. And then I think ultimately in the long term is I want to spread greater awareness of our being side. I just know that when people focus on their being side, it's transformational. But the reality is that most people don't really know that they have a being side, and therefore they never really focus on it. So I want to help make these ideas and concepts more mainstream so that people are more empowered to transformationally become better.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Ryan. And what will be your advice for those people out there want to becoming better?
Well, it all starts with self-awareness. And so if my tools can help you with that, I would invite people to go to my website, ryangottfredson.com. I have a couple of free personal assessments there to help you awaken to your quality and altitude of your being side. And then there's some support and resources to help you elevate along your being side.
Indeed, people, it's time to becoming better. And thank you for your advice, Mr. Ryan. So, what's the biggest myth about personal transformation that your book debunks?
Well, the biggest myth is that most people feel like to get better, they have to work harder. And they have to double down. And what I've learned is that just generally doesn't work, because generally when we're working harder at something, we're focused on improving on our doing side. So this book introduces a completely different strategy for personal development than what we're used to, but it's a strategy where we're going to see a bigger bang for our investment. So I hope that as people pick up this book, read it, that that's the experience that they have.
Yes, people, read it. Mr. Ryan, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and of course, my book 101 review on fifth season, comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in its fifth season as well, geography 101 and love letters are in third season, and my baby podcast, mental health 101, movie 101 review and music 101 in its fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please do listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. Ryan, what's one key takeaway you hope every reader will gain from becoming better?
Wow. Well, and yeah, look at all those podcasts you have. You're a renaissance man, Daniel. So this is great. But the one thing that I would love readers to take away is just simply the idea that they can transform themselves. They could transformationally become better. And it really comes down to our willingness and our ability to seek after healing our minds, our bodies, and our hearts.
Indeed, people, amazing and great, empowering book, Becoming Better. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world, Mr. Ryan. And can you please invite our listeners to support your upcoming book?
That would be great. You can find my book on my website, ryangottfredson.com. Also connect with me on social media. Would love to connect with you there.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Ryan, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Ryan, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
More to come, people. See you soon.